Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some evil. This society needs a spectacle.
On A View from the Outside this week being the 15th of February 2020, we look at Circumvent, C-I-R-C-U-M-V-E-N-T, Circumvent, with the view being that the freedom of the people of St Vincent and the Grenadines is constantly being eroded when at every turn, government and some government officials who represent St Vincent and the Grenadines circumvent and even breach rules of policy and procedure, seemingly without there being any accountability or sanction. The Cambridge Dictionary defines circumvent as to avoid something, especially cleverly or illegally. And the Collins Dictionary states that if someone circumvents a rule or restriction, they avoid having to obey the rule or restriction in a clever and perhaps dishonest way. Those definitions tell us that to circumvent something involves to cleverly avoid doing that thing. To circumvent something could involve illegally trying to avoid that thing. The definitions tell us that to circumvent something involves disobedience of rules or restrictions, and to circumvent something could involve dishonesty. Earlier in the week, it was reported that in the news that the United Kingdom, the UK, suspended its funding to the Commonwealth Secretariat. The Commonwealth Secretariat is an international organization operating in London which runs or oversees the affairs of the Commonwealth. The current Secretary General of the Commonwealth is Baroness Scotland, who has Dominican origin. It is reported that Baroness Scotland was told that the British government is withholding its annual voluntary funding of £4.7 million until the Secretariat improves its financial procedures. The UK's decision to suspend its funding ensued after it transpired that external auditors of the Secretariat criticized Baroness Scotland and accused her of circumventing usual competitive tendering rules and awarded a lucrative consultancy contract to a friend, an accusation which she has denied. The decision of the United Kingdom to suspend its contributions has been followed by Australia and New Zealand. Such decision threatens to plunge the Commonwealth Secretariat into financial crisis. The Commonwealth Secretariat has been audited and called upon to put things right. It has even been reported that Baroness Scotland's automatic second term, which comes up for renewal sometime this year, has already been rejected by many of the heads of government of the Commonwealth. And so for the allegations against her, she seems likely to lose her job. It is clear that the heads of government of the Commonwealth are determined for there to be accountability and sanctions for the alleged breaches and the reported circumventing of its rules. That situation of accountability and sanctions seem to be completely lacking when it comes to governance in St Vincent and the Grenadines. In that regard, one cannot forget the attempt by agents of the ruling party to deposit $1 million in cash into the Accountant General's account. That is the account of the government of St Vincent and the Grenadines. And to date, the people of St Vincent and the Grenadines are still unaware of the origin of that money. The financial, investigative, and regulatory authorities in the country appear to have taken no action whatsoever. No one, absolutely no one, has been held accountable or sanctioned for it. Then there is the issue when government illegally and flagrantly bypassed the tenders board and awarded a contract allegedly to friends of the government, and where a government minister admitted that he bypassed the tenders board and that he will do it again. No one has been held accountable for such illegality. No one has been sanctioned for it. Having referred to the tenders board, mention must be made of the recent issue of the spurious award of a contract financed by the Caribbean Development Bank, the CDB, to a company contracted to carry out sea defense work at the Yarabakwa River at Bellevue on the windward side of the country. It later transpired that the award of that contract was in breach of the CDB's procurement rules. And following the investigation of a complaint by another contracting company, the CDB declared that there was misprocurement, and they terminated the contract, and they unusually demanded that all monies already spent on the project be repaid, and repaid with interest, by the government of St Vincent and the Grenadines. To date, there has been no accountability and no sanction of anyone. In fact, the opposite has happened, where the government continued with the same contractor at the expense of the taxpayers of the country. There are many more examples of the rules of the tendering process seemingly being circumvented in relation to tendering in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Just a few days ago, the proprietors of the construction company Bally & Bally at a press conference outlined a catalogue of examples of how their company suffered and continues to suffer at the hands of the powers that be to unjustly deny them the award of contracts. Sadly, no one is held accountable or sanctioned when the rules are circumvented. And sadly, too, it is the taxpayers and the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines who pay the ultimate price. Vincentians, you will no doubt remember the many calls for accountability, calls from you, the people, up and down the country, calls from us here on A View from the Outside. You will remember the call for accountability in relation to the construction of the Argyle International Airport. You will no doubt remember also that the call is an ongoing one, especially when the government continues to ignore its obligations as prescribed by the Constitution, the highest law of the land. You will also remember the call for accountability in relation to the Petrocarib Fund after the government circumvented the rules and illegally administered that fund for many years. Accountability for those monies is still outstanding and remains a burning and live issue. During the recent budget debate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the opposition party, and primarily the opposition leader, Dr. Godwin Friday, outlined multiple examples of when and how the government circumvented the rules of policy and procedure. It transpired that the audit reports to deem whether or not the government is functioning properly are 7 years behind schedule. It must be remembered here that the Director of Audit previously complained that the Office of the Director of Audit lacks the necessary resources to function fully and properly. Is this a way that the government uses to circumvent the rules of audit in order to avoid accountability. There is also the revelation by Dr. Friday that the government has been circumventing the rules and constantly breaking the law by exceeding the allowable and permissible overdraft limit without seeking the approval of Parliament. And they have been doing so with no accountability and no sanction. Most shockingly, in relation to the revelations of the said budget debate, the Speaker of the House of Assembly revealed in his weekly newspaper column that the government, for which he contested elections during the last general elections of December 2015, the government has acted illegally in relation to the overdraft. And he went on to state that, and I quote, "This is not the first time the government was found to be acting outside of the law. This is not the first time government acts as though it will not be constrained by the law," unquote. He then went on to cite the issue of the abuse and breach of special warrant rules, which opposition parliamentarian Sinclair Leacock raised previously. He, the Speaker, then asked the questions, and I quote, "If government couldn't so willy-nilly disregard legal requirements, are there other legal actions which have not yet been disclosed? What other illegal act will it be prepared to do in the dark, quiet halls of power?" Unquote. The Speaker, having made such admissions and acknowledgement of illegality by the government, are deeply concerning, especially when one considers that the said Speaker presided over the most blatant and egregious form of injustice in St Vincent and the Grenadines, and perhaps in any functioning democracy in the world, when he allowed secondary legislation and rules to supersede the Constitution, the highest law of the land, and ruled that the opposition cannot ever debate a motion of no confidence against the government. Dark, quiet halls of power, one may ask. There are many more examples of when rules have been circumvented, which can be cited. However, time and space do not permit us to mention them all here. And as such, we encourage you, the listeners, we encourage you, Vincentians, to reflect on other examples, recent or more dated, when this government and or its agents at home and abroad have circumvented rules of policy and procedure to gain an unfair advantage. And as you do so, we, here on A View from the Outside, also encourage you to think about the predicament which the Commonwealth Secretariat now finds itself in with the allegations leveled against Baroness Scotland. Give consideration to the way accountability is meant to work and the kinds of sanctions which could befall an organization or an individual when they try to circumvent rules of policy and procedure. We also implore you to continue to demand accountability and demand that no one should try to circumvent the laws, rules, policies, and procedures in or on behalf of the country. As you reflect, as we all reflect, let us bear in mind the words of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States of America. He said, and I quote, "The greatest danger to freedom is one that ignores the Constitution." Vincentians, let us not ignore that they are ignoring or circumventing the Constitution, the laws, the rules of policy and procedure in St Vincent and the Grenadines. Vincentian, the future is in our hands. Until next week, Randy and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with A View from the Outside, with a reminder to send feedback as usual to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit us and like our Facebook page at A View from the Outside, and also to visit and like or subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Horne.